World of Warcraft, The Last Guardian, by Jeff Grubb. Chapter 12, Lifetime in Wartime. Or, it took only several days to put the library back in proper order. Most of the scattered books were at least near to where they needed to be, and the rare, more magical trapped volumes were in the upper balcony and had been untouched by the farce. Rebuilding some of the cases took time, however, and Garona and Khadgar turned the empty stables into makeshift carpentry shop, and they tried to restore, and in some cases replace, the shattered cases. Of the demon there was no trace, save for the damaged rot. The claw marks remained in the table, and the pages of the leniency of Azeroth's kings were badly mangled and torn, as if by massive jaws. Yet there was no body, no blood, no remains to drop at Medivh's feet. "Maybe it was rescued," suggested Garona. "It was pretty dead when we left it," responded Khadgar, at the time trying to remember if he had put epic poetry on the shelf above or below romantic epics. "Something rescued the body," said Garona. "The same person who popped it in here would have popped him out." "And the blood as well," reminded Khadgar. "And the blood as well," repeated the half-orc. "Perhaps it was a tidy demon." "That's not the way magic works," said Khadgar. "Perhaps your magic, the magic you learned," said Garona. "Other people could have other magics. The old shamans among the orcs had one way of magic. The warlocks that cast spells have different ones. Maybe the spell you never heard of." "No," said Khadgar simply. "It would have left some kind of marker, a bit of the caster behind, some residual energy that I could feel, even though I could not identify it. The only spellcasters active in the tower have been myself and the Magus. I know that through my own spells, and I checked the wards. Medivh was right. They were all operating. No one has been able to break into the tower magically or otherwise." Garona shrugged. "But there are odd things about this tower as well. Correct? Could the old rules not apply here?" It was Khadgar's turn to shrug. "If that is the case, we're in a lot more trouble than I imagined." Khadgar's relationship with the half-orc seemed to improve over the course of repairing the library, and when his back was to her or she was in the stacks, her voice sounded almost human. Still, she remained guarded about whom she represented, and Khadgar, for his part, remained watchful. He kept track of what references she used and what questions she asked. He also tried to keep track of any communication she had made, to the point of wrapping the guest quarters, with his own web of detection spells, to inform him if she had left the room or sent word out. If she had, her methods foiled even Khadgar's detection, which made him more nervous as opposed to assuring him. If she was doing anything with the knowledge she had gained, she was keeping it to herself. And true to her word, Garona began to share her own knowledge about the orcs. Khadgar began to assemble a picture of how the orcs were ruled, by strength and warrior prowess, as well as the different clans within. Once she got rolling, the emissary made it very clear her opinion on the various clans, whose leaders she tended to think of as Lumphan Opes, who are only thinking of their next battle, is coming from. She described the multi-clan orcish nation, the Horde. Khadgar quickly understood that the dynamics were ever-changing and fluid at best. A large chunk of the Horde was a conservative Bleeding Hollow clan, a powerful group with long history of conquest. The clan was less powerful than its aged leader, Kilrog Deadeye, who had become more unwilling to throw away lives in combat. Agrona explained that in orcish politics, older orcs become more pragmatic, which is often mistaken for cowardice by the younger generation. Kilrock had killed 3 of his sons and 2 grandsons already, who thought they could rule the clan better. The clan known as the Black Rock appeared to have another large chunk of the horde. Its leader was Blackhand, who had his chief recommendation for leadership the ability to thump had the ability to trump anyone else who wanted the title. A chunk of Blackrock's had already splintered off, knocked out a tooth, and called themselves the Blacktooth Grin. Charming names. There were other clans, Twilight Hammer, which reveled in destruction, and the Burning Blade, who seemed to have no leader, but rather served as an arcanic gathering within the chaos of the horde. And smaller clans, like the Stormreavers that were led by the Warlock. Khadgar suspected that Garona was reporting to someone within the Stormweaver clan, if only because she had less to complain about them than the others. Khadgar took what notes he could and assembled them into reports for Lothar. A large amount of communication was coming in at all points in Azeroth, and now it seemed that the horde was spilling out of the Black Morass in all directions. The orcs that were considered mere rumors a year ago were now omnipresent, and Stormwind Keep was mobilizing to meet the threat. Khadgar kept an ever-worsening news from Garona, but fed to Lothar what details he could glean, down to clan rivalries and favorite colors. The Blackrock clan, for example, favored red for some reason. Khadgar also tried to communicate what he had learned to Medivh, but the Magus was surprisingly disinterested. Indeed, the Magus' conversation with Garona were not as common as they once were, and on several occasions discovered that the Magus had left the tower without informing him. Even when he was present, Medivh seemed more distant. More than once Khadgar had come upon him seated in one of the chairs in the observatory, staring into the Azerothian night. He seemed moodier now, quicker to disagree and less willing to listen than before. His disaffectionate mood was clear to the others as well. Moros would give Khadgar a painful, long-suffering look as he left the master's chambers, and Garona herself brought up the subject as they reviewed the maps of the known world, which were made in Stormwind, and as such woefully incomplete even when talking about Lordaeron. "Is he always like this?" she asked. Khadgar responded stoically, "He has his moods." "Yes, but when I first encountered him, he seemed alive, engaged and polite. Now he seems more distracted?" "Addled," said Garona, twisting her lips in disgust. Khadgar could not disagree. Later that evening, Khadgar reported to the Magus a slew of new message translations, all with the purple seal, all begging for aid against the orcs. "The orcs are not demons," said Medivh. "They are flesh and blood, and as such the worry of warriors, not wizards." "The messages are quite dire," said Khadgar. "It sounds like the lands closest to the Black Morass are being abandoned, and refugees are flooding into Stormwind and other cities in Azeroth. They are pressed thin, and so depend on the Guardian to ride to their rescue. Bad enough I must guard the watchtowers on the twisting nether to watch for demons and hunt down the mistakes of these amateurs. Now I must rescue them against other nations? Will I be asked to support Azeroth in a trade dispute with Lordaeron next? Such matters should not be our worry." "They may not be an Azeroth without your help. Lothar is a fool," murmured Medivh. "An old mother hen that sees threat everywhere, and Lane is little better, seeing nothing that could break his walls and the order. All the mighty mages they have quarreled and argued and spat among themselves, so now they don't have the power to repel the new invader. No, young trust, this is little stuff, even for the orcs. Even if the orcs succeed in Azeroth, they would need a guardian, and I would be here for them." "Master, that's sacrilege." Blasphemy? Betrayal? The magus sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose. Perhaps, but I am a man made old before my time, and I have paid a great price for my unwanted power. Permit me to rail against the clockworks and rule my life. Now go. I'll return to your tales of woe in the morning. As he was closing the door, Khadgar heard Medivh add, and I am so tired of worrying about everything. When can I worry about myself? The orcs have attacked Stormwind, said Khadgar. It was 3 weeks later. He had laid the missive on the table between him and Garona. The half-orc stared at the red-sealed envelope like it was a venomous snake. I am sorry, she said at last. They will not, as a rule, take prisoners. The orc forces were repelled this time, said Khadgar, thrown back before they reached the gates by lame troops. From descriptions, it sounds like Kilrog's Bleeding Hollow and the Twilight Hammer clans. They seem to be a lack of coordination between the major forces. Garona gave a bulldog sneeze grunt and said, The Twilight Hammer should have never been put on assault in a siege situation. Kilrog likely was trying to decimate a rival and use Stormwind as his ammo to do so. So even in the midst of an attack, they continue to brawl and betray each other, said Khadgar. He wondered if his own reports to Lothar had given them the information they needed to break the assaults. Grona shrugged. Very much like humans, she motioned to the books piled high on the sturdy table. In your histories, there are continual justifications for all manner of hellish actions, claims to nobility and heritage, and honor to cover up every bit of genocide, assassination, and massacre. At least the Horde is honest in their naked lust for power. She was silent for a moment and then added, I don't think I could have helped them. The Orcs or Stormwind? Asked Khadgar. Either, said Garona. Did not know about any attack on Stormwind, if that's what you're hinting at, though anyone with half an ounce of sense would know that the Horde would strike against the biggest target as soon as possible. You know that from our discussions. You know that they'll pull back, regroup, kill a few leaders, and then come back in greater numbers. I can guess, yes, said Khadgar. And you already sent a letter to the champion at Stormwind just to that effect. Khadgar thought he kept his face passive, but the orc emissary gave a wide smile. Yes, you did. Khadgar now felt his face turn flushed, but pressed at his point. Actually, the question I have is, why haven't you been reporting to your masters? The green-fleshed woman leaned back in her seat. Who says I haven't? I do, said Khadgar. Unless you're a better mage than I am. A small tick at the corner of Grona's mouth betrayed her. You haven't been reporting in at all, have you? You haven't been reporting in at all, have you? Asked Khadgar. Gronos was silent for a moment, and Khadgar let the silence fill the library. At length, she said, Let's just say I've been having a problem with divided loyalties. I thought you had no allegiance, said Khadgar. Grona ignored him. I was sent here, ordered by a warlock named Gul'dan, spellcaster, leader of the Stormweavers, very influential in the Horde, very interested in the mages of your world. And the orcs have a tendency to strike the biggest target first. Medivh, said Khadgar. Gul'dan, said Medivh, was special. From what secrets, divination, or spice-fueled meditation he used to come to that conclusion, I don't know. Garona avoided Kagar's glance. I met several times with Medivh in the field, then agreed to come to the tower here as an emissary. I was supposed to trade basic information and report back to Gul'dan as much as I could about Medivh's strengths. So you were right from the start. I was here as a spy. Kagar sat down across from her. You wouldn't have been the first, he said. So why didn't you report back? Grona was silent for a moment. Medivh, she started, then stopped. The old man. Another pause. He saw through it all at once, of course. And he still told me what I wanted to know. Most of it, at least. I know, said Kagar. He had the same effect on me. Grona nodded. At first I thought he was just being pompous. Sure, in his power, like some orc chieftains I know. But there's something else. It's as if he feels that by giving me knowledge, he knew I'd be changed by it and would not betray his trust. Trust, said Kagar. That's a big thing for Medivh. He seems to exude it. Standing next to him, you feel he knows what he's doing. Right, said Grona. And the orcs are drawn to power naturally. I figured I could tell Gul'dan that I was held prisoner, unable to respond, and so I learned more, and eventually... You didn't want to see him hurt, finished Kagar. As Morose would say, yep, said Garona. He put a lot of trust in me, and he puts it in you, too. After watching your vision power thing, I told him about it. I figured that might have brought the demon down on us. He said he knew it and didn't bother him. Then you were naturally curious, and it served you well. He stands by his people. And you can't hurt someone like that, said Kagar. Yep. He made me feel human. And I haven't felt human in a long time. The old man, Magus Medivh, seems to have a dream of more than one force battling another for domination. With his power, he could have destroyed us all, yet he does not. I think he believes in something better. And I want to believe his dream as well. The two sat there for a while in silence. Somewhere in the distance, Morose or Cook moved along the hallway. And recently, said Garona, has he ever been like this before? She sounded like Lothar, trying to ask without seeming too concerned. Kagar shook his head. He's always been erratic, eccentric, but I've never seen him this depressed. Brooding? Added Garona. Neutral. Up to now, I've always assumed he would be on the side of the Kingdom of Azeroth. But if Stormwind itself is attacked, and he still does nothing? It may be his own training, said Kagar, choosing his words carefully. He did not want to reveal the order to Garona, regardless of his current feelings. He has to take a very long view on things. It sometimes cuts him off from others. Which is why he takes in strays, I suppose, said Garona. Another silence, then she added, I'm not sorry that Stormwind repelled the invaders. You don't destroy something like that from without. You have to do something from within to weaken the walls first. I'm glad you're not there as a general, said Kagar. Chieftain, said Garona. I think I'd get a chance. There is something, said Kagar, then stopped. Garona tilted her heavily mauled head towards him. You sound like someone looking for a favor, she said. I have never asked you about troop strength and positions, about obvious spy stuff. But, said Kagar, they're amazed by the huge number of orc warriors on the field. They fought them back, were surprised that the swamp of the Black Morass could hold that many soldiers. Even now, they're worried about the forces that could be hiding within the marshlands. I know nothing of troop dispositions, said Garona. I've been here, spying on you, remember? True, said Kagar. But I also know you talked of your homeland. How did you get from there to here? Was it some spell? Garona sat quietly for a moment, as if trying to resolve something in her mind. Kagar expected a flip comment, or a redirection of the subject, or even another question in response. Instead, she said, We call our homeworld Draenor. It is a savage world, filled with badlands and bluffs and hard-scraped vegetation, inhospitable and stormy. And it has a red sky, added Kagar. Garona looked up at the young mage. You have spoken with other orcs? Prisoners, perhaps? I was unaware the humans took orc prisoners. No, a vision, said Kagar. The memory seemed like half a lifetime away. Much like you saw the first time we met. It was the first time I'd seen orcs. I remember there were huge numbers of them. Garona let out a bulldog snort. Your visions probably revealed more than you say. But you have a good picture. Orcs are faceted and large litters are common, because so many die before they reach a warrior's age. It was a hard life, and only the strong, the powerful, and the smart survived. I was in the third group, but I was still a near outcast, surviving as best I could at the fringes of the clan. That would be the Storm Reavers at the time, at least when the older order went out. Order? We were put on the march, every warrior and every capable hand, grunt laborer and swordsman, all ordered to pack up their weapons, tools, and belongings and head for the Hellfire Peninsula. There, a great portal had been erected by Gul'dan and other powerful warlocks, a portal that broke through the space between worlds. Garona sucked on a fang, remembering. It was a great set of standing stones, hauled there to frame a rip in space itself. Within the rip were the colors of darkness, a swirling like oil on the surface of a polluted pool. I got the feeling that rip had been forged by greater hands, and the warlocks had just contained it. Many of the most hardened warriors feared the space between the pillars, but the chieftains and underchiefs made passionate speeches about what wars to be found on the other side. A world of riches, a world of plenty, a world of soft creatures who would be easily dominated. All this they promised. Some still resisted. Some were slain. Others were forced through with axes resting against their backs. I was caught with a large group of laborers and shoved into the space between the pillars. Garona fell silent for a moment. It's called the Twisting Nether, and it was both instantaneous and eternal. I fell forever, and when I emerged into the strange light, it was a mad new world. Kagar added, after a promise of paradise, the Black Morass would be quite a letdown. Garona shook her head. It was a shock. I remember quailing at the first sight of the blue, hostile sky, and the land covered with vegetation as far as the eye could see. Some could not take it and went mad. Many joined the burning blade, the chaos orcs thronging beneath their fire-orange pigment that day. Grona stroked her heavy chin. I feared, but I survived. And I found my half-breed life gave me insight on these humans. I was part of an abomination ambush party that attacked Medivh. He killed everyone else, but left me alive, and sent me with a message back to the warlock Gul'dan. And after a while, Gul'dan sent me as a spy. But I found I had difficulty betraying the old man's secrets. Divided loyalties, commented Khadgar. But to answer your question, said Grona, no. I do not know how many clans have poured through the dark portal from Draenor, and I don't know how long it will take for them to recover, and I don't know where the portal came from. But you, Khadgar, can find out. Khadgar blinked. Me? Your visions, said Grona. You seem to be able to summon up the ghosts of the past, even from far away. I watched you call up a vision of Medivh's mother when I first met you. That was Stormwind we were at. Yes, said Khadgar. That is why I still think the demon in the library was real. There was no background to the vision. Grona waved off his comment. But you can call up these visions. You can summon up the moment when the rift was first created. You can find out who brought the orcs to Azeroth. Aye, said Khadgar. And I bet it's the same major warlock that has been unleashing demons. It makes sense that the two would be linked. He looked at Grona. You know, that would not be a question I would have thought of. I will provide the questions, said Grona, looking very pleased with her, if you provide the answers. The empty dining room again. The ever-diligent Morose had swept up the earlier casting circle, and Khadgar had to recast it with streams of crushed rose quartet and amethyst. Grona lit torches onto the wall sconces, then stood in the center of the pattern next to him. I'll warn you, he said to the half-orc, this may not work. You'll do well, replied Grona. I've seen you do it before. I'll probably get something, said Khadgar. I just don't know what. He made the motions with his hands and intoned the words. With Grona watching, he wanted to get everything just right. At last he released the mystical energy from the cage within his mind and shouted, Show me the origin of the rift between Draenor and Azeroth. There was a change in the pressure, in the very weight of the air around them. It was warm and night, but the night sky out of their window, for there was a window now in these quarters, was deep red, the color of old dry blood. Only a few weak stars pierced the envelope. It was someone's quarter, likely an orc leader. There were fur rugs on the floor and a large platform that would serve as a bed. A low fire pit burned in the center of the room. Weapons hung on the stone walls, and there were a plethora of cabinets as well. One was open, showing the line of preserved things, some of which might have belonged to human or orcish creatures. The figure in the bed turned, and then sat up suddenly, as awakened from a bad dream. He stared into the darkness, and his savage, war-torn face was clear, even by orc standards. He was an ugly representation of his race. Grona let out a sharp glass and said, Go down. Khadgar nodded and said, He should not see you. This, then, was the warlock that had sent Grona to spy. He looked about as trustworthy as a bent gold piece. For the moment, he wrapped himself in his furs and spoke. "I can see you," he said, "even though I think I'm awake. Perhaps I dream. I am awake. Come forth, demon creature." Grona gripped Kagar's shoulder, and he could feel her sharp fingernails dig into his flesh, but Gul'dan was not speaking to them. Instead, a new specter wafted into view. It was tall and broad-shouldered, taller than any of the other three. It was translucent, as if it did not belong here either. It was hooded, and its voice ready and distant, though only the light from it was from the fire pit. The figure cast two shadows, one directly back from the flames, the other one to the side, as if lit by a different source. "Gul'dan," said the figure, "I want your people. I want your armies. I want your power to aid me." "I have called upon my spirit protectors, creature," said Gul'dan, and Kagar could hear the tremor in the orc's voice. "I've called upon my warlocks, and they have quelled you before you. I have called upon my mystic master, and he has failed to stop you. You haunt my dreams, and now you come, a dream creature, into my world. Who and what are you truly?" "You fear me," said the tall figure, and at the sound of his voice, Kagar felt a cold hand run down his spine. "For you do not understand me. See my world and understand your fear. Then fear no more." With that, the tall hooded figure shaped a ball out of the air, as light and clear as a soap bubble. It floated about a foot in diameter, and within it showed a tableau of a land with blue sky and green field. The cloaked figure was showing him Azeroth. Another bubble followed, and then another, and then a fourth. The sun-dripped fields of summer grain, the swamps of the black morass, the ice fields of the north, the shining towers of Stormwind Keep, and a bubble that contained a lone tower cradled within the crater of hills, lit by clear moonlight. He was showing the orc spellcaster Karazhan. And there was another bubble, a fleeting one, that showed some dark scene far beneath the waves. It seemed an errant thought, one that was quickly eradicated, yet Kagar got the feeling of power. There was a grave beneath the waves, a crypt, one that surged with power like a heartbeat. It was there for an instant, then gone. "Gather your forces," said the cloaked figure. "Gather your armies, and your warriors, and your laborers, and allies, and prepare them for a journey through the twisting nether. Prepare them well, for this will be yours when you succeed." Shagar shook his head. The voice stung at him like an errant gnat. Then he realized who it was, and his heart quailed. Gul'dan was up on his knees, his hands clasped before him. "I shall do so, for yours is power most supreme. But who are you truly, and how will we reach this world?" The figure raised his hand to his hood, and Kagar shook his head. He didn't want to see it. He knew, but he did not want to see it. A deep-lined face, gray brows, green eyes that sparkled with hidden knowledge and something dangerous. Next to him, Grona let out a gasp. "I am the Guardian," said Medivh to the Orc Warlock. "I will open the way for you. I will smash the cycle and be freed." Chapter 13. The Second Shadow. "No!" shouted Kagar, and the vision ebbed at once. They were alone in the dining hall, once more at the center of an ornate pattern made of crushed aegis and rose quartz. His ears tingled, and the corners of his vision seemed to close in on him. He had sunk to one knee, but was unaware that he had even moved. Above him to his right, Garona's voice sounded hushed, almost strangled. "Medivh," she said quietly. "The old man. It couldn't be." "It can be," said Khadgar. His stomach felt like knotted snakes were churning within his flesh. His mind was already racing through, though he feverishly wished to deny it. He knew its destination. "No," said Garona grimly. "It must be a misfire, a false vision. We went looking for one thing and found something else. You said it happened before." "Not like this," said Khadgar. We may not be shown what we want, but we are always shown the truth." "Perhaps it's just a warning," said the half-orc. "It makes sense," said Khadgar, and there was a sound of trust and regret in his voice. "Think about it. That's why the wards are still intact after they were attacked. He was already within the wards, and summoned the demon within." "It doesn't seem like him," said Garona. "Perhaps it was an illusion, some magical fakery. It didn't seem like him." "It was him," said the apprentice, rising now. "I know the master's voice. I know the master's face, in all his moods and manners." "But it was like someone else was wearing that face," said Garona. "Something false. Like it was a set of clothes or a suit of armor that someone else was wearing." Khadgar looked at the half-orc. Her voice was tremulous, and tears pooled at the corners of her wide eyes. She wanted to believe. She truly wanted to believe. Khadgar wanted to believe as well. He nodded slowly. "It could be a trick. It could still be him. He could be tricking that orc, convincing him to come here. Maybe a vision of the future." Now it was Garona's turn to shake her head. "No, that was Gul'dan. He's already here. He herded us through the portal. This was the past. This was their first meeting. But why would Medivh want to bring the orcs into Azeroth?" "It explains why he hasn't done much to oppose them," said Khadgar. He shook his head, trying to loosen the thoughts that were lodged there. So many things suddenly make sense. Odd disappearances, little interest in the increasing number of orcs, even bringing the half-orc into the castle. He regarded Garona and wondered how deeply she was involved in the plot. She seemed completely taken aback by the news, yet she was a contributor. Was she a contributor, or another pawn in the shadowy play that Medivh seemed to be running? "We need to find out," he said simply. "We need to know why he was there, what he was doing. He is the Guardian. We should not condemn him on a single vision." Garona nodded slowly. "So we ask him. How?" Khadgar opened his mouth to respond, but another voice sounded through the halls. "What is this brouhaha?" said Medivh, rounding the corner at the dining hall's entrance. Khadgar's throat constricted and went dry. The magus stood in the doorway, and Khadgar looked at him, hunting for something in his walk, his appearance, his voice, anything to betray his presence. There was nothing. This was Medivh. "What are you children up to?" said the magus, his gray brows furrowing. Khadgar struggled for an answer, but Garona said, "The apprentice was showing me a spell he was working on." Her voice fluttered. Medivh grunted. "Another of your visions, young trust. They're bad enough around here without you calling them up the past. Come out of there at once. We have work to do. You as well, emissary." His voice was measured and understanding, but firm. The stern voice of the wise mentor. Khadgar took a step forward, but Garona grabbed him by the arm. "Shadows!" she hissed. Khadgar blinked and looked at the magus again. Impatience showed on his face now, and disapproval. His shoulders were still broad. He held himself upright despite the pressure on him. He was dressed in robes Khadgar had seen him wear often before, and behind him trailed two shadows, one directly away from the torch, and the other equally dark at an odd angle. Khadgar hesitated, and Medivh's disapproval deepened. A storm gathered on his face. "What is the matter, young trust?" "We should clean up our mess," said Khadgar, trying to be light. "Don't want to make Morose work too hard. We'll catch up." "Negotiation is not part of an apprentice's duty," said Medivh. "Now come here at once." No one moved. Garona said, "Why doesn't he come into the room?" Why indeed, thought Khadgar. Instead, he said, "One question, Master." "What now?" grunted the Master Mage. "Why did you visit the Orc Gul'dan's dreams?" said Khadgar, feeling his throat tightening as he asked. "Why did you show the orcs how to come into this world?" Medivh's glare shifted to Garona. "I was unaware Gul'dan told you of me. He didn't strike me as being unwise or a chatterbox." Garona took a step back, but this time Khadgar restrained her. She said, I didn't know until now." Medivh snorted. "'Tis little matter. Now come here, both of you." "Why did you show the orcs the way here?" repeated Khadgar. "You do not negotiate with your betters," snapped the mage. "Why did you bring the orcs to Azeroth?" asked Khadgar, pleading now. "It is none of your business, child. You will come here now." The Magus's face was livid and twisted. "With respect, sir," said Khadgar, and his words felt like daggers thrusts. "No, I will not." Medivh thundered in rage. "Child! I will have you!" And as he spoke, he stepped into the room. Sparks flew up at once, bathing the older mage in a shower of light. The Magus staggered back a step, then raised his hands and murmured a curse. "What?" began Garona. "A circle of warding," snapped Khadgar, "to keep summoned demons at bay. The Magus cannot cross it." "But if it only affects demons, why not?" "Unless..." Garona looked at Khadgar. "No," she said. "Can the circle hold him back?" Khadgar thought of Jack Straw laying across the ward in the tower at Stormwind, and the energy blossoming by the doorway. He shook his head. Instead, he shouted at the Magus, Is this what you did to Holgar and Hurrigan and Guzba and the others? Did they figure things out?" "They were further from the truth than you were, child," said the illuminated Magus through gritted teeth. "But I had to be careful. I forgave your curiosity for your youth and thought that loyalty." He grunted now as the protective wards resisted him. "I thought that loyalty still mattered in this world." The protective wards blazed as Medivh moved into them, and Khadgar could see the fields distorting around Magus's outstretched palms. The flickering of sparks seemed to catch Medivh's beard on fire, and smoke curled up like horns from his forehead. And then Khadgar's heart sank, for he realized that what he was seeing was another image. This one laid over the image of the beloved mage. The image that belonged to the second shadow. "He's going to get through!" Khadgar gritted his teeth. "Eventually. He's pouring huge amounts of power into breaking the circle." "Can he do that?" asked the half-orc. "He's the guardian of Tristfall," said Khadgar. "He can do whatever he wants. It just takes time." "Well, can we get out of here?" Garona sounded panicked now. Our only way out is past him." Garona looked around. "Throw that wall out, then. New exit!" Khadgar looked at the stonework of the tower, but shook his head. "Well, try something!" "Try this," said Khadgar. Before them, the figure of Medivh, taller now and wreathed in lightning, loomed up in smoke. Calming himself, he pulled the magical energies into himself. He made the motions he had made only minutes before, and intoned the words lost to mortal men. When he had compressed the energy into a single ball of light, he released it. "Bring me a vision," said Kagar, "one of who has fought this beast before." There was a brief bit of disorientation, and for a moment Kagar thought the spell had misfired and transported them to the observatory up top the tower. But no. It was now night around them, and an imperious, angry female voice spat in the air. "You dare strike your own mother!" shouted Egwene, her own face livid with rage. Egwene stood at one end of the observatory deck, Medivh at the other. It was Medivh as he knew him, tall, proud, and apparently worried. Neither she nor the past Medivh paid any attention to either Kagar or Garona. With a start, Kagar realized that the present incarnation of Medivh was present as well. Sparkling along one wall, the pair from the past ignored him as well, but the present Medivh was watching the spectacle played out before them. "Mother, I thought you were being hysterical," said the past Medivh. "So a mystic bolt would bring me to my senses?" snapped the previous guardian. Kagar saw that she was much older now. Her blonde hair was now white, and there were tight wrinkles around her eyes and mouth. Still, she held the presence of the earlier forms he had seen. "Now," she said, "answer my question." "Mother, you're not seeing things right," said the past Medivh. "Answer!" snapped Egwene sternly. "Why did you bring the orcs to Azeroth?" "No wonder he was so testy when you asked him that," said Garona. Kagar shushed her and kept an eye on the present Medivh. The present incarnation had ceased to press against the wall of the wards, and his face seemed to have lost its emotion. "Mother," said the present Medivh. His face looked credulous. "You don't have an answer, do you?" said Egwene. "This is some little game you're playing, some challenge for Lane and Lothar to amuse themselves with. The power of the Tristfalian is no game, child. There are more orcs coming in all the time, and I'm hearing of caverns being raided near the Black Morass. A novice could trace back to your portal, but only your mother would be able to taste the power that's wrapped in. Again, child, how do you account for yourself?" Kagar wilted under the older woman's invective, and half expected the past Medivh to flee the room. Instead, Medivh surprised him. He laughed deeply. "Does your mother's disapproval of you amuse you, child?" said Egwene sternly. "No," said Medivh, flashing a deep predatory grin. "But my mother's stupidity does." Kagar looked across the room and saw the present Medivh flinch at the sound of his past incarnation's words. "You dare!" thundered Egwene, raising her hand. A spear of blazing white light erupted from her palm, lancing towards the past Medivh. The Magus raised a hand and turned it aside with ease. "I do, mother," said the phantom in the past. "And I have the power for it. The power that you invested me with at my conception. A power that I did not want or request." The phantom Medivh gestured, and the topmost floor was alight with a blazing bolt. Egwene caught the energy herself, but Kagar noted that she had to raise both hands and was still staggered back. "But why did you let the orcs into Azeroth?" hissed the older woman. "There's no need. You put entire populations at risk. And to what end?" "To break the cycle, of course," said the past Medivh. "To smash the clockwork universe that you have built for me. Everything is in place, including your child. If you could not continue on as guardian, your hand-picked born and groomed successor would, but would be locked into his script as tightly as any of your other pawns." The present Medivh had sunk to his knees. His eyes looked at the tableau before him. He was mouthing the words that his past self had spoken. Garona tugged on Khadgar's sleeve and nodded. The pair left the heart of the wards and began to edge around the room, trying to ease behind the present incarnation of the Magus. "But the risk, child!" said Egwin. "Risk?" said Medivh. "Risk to whom? Not me. Not with the power of the Trisfalian at my command. To the rest of the Order. They worry more about internal politics than demons. To the human nations. Fat and happy, protected from dangers that they could not even know about. Is anyone important really at risk?" "You're playing with forces greater than yourself, son," said Egwin. Khadgar and Garona were nearly to the door, but the present Medivh was held rapt by the vision. "Oh, of course," said Medivh's past with a snarl. "Thinking that I could handle powers like that would be a sin of pride. Sort of like thinking you could match wits with a demon lord and come out on top." They were behind Medivh now, and Garona reached for the knife inside her blouse. Khadgar stopped her hand and shook his head. They slipped behind Medivh. Tears were starting to form in the old man's eyes. "What happens if these orcs succeed?" said Egwin. "They worship dark gods and shadows. Why would you give Azeroth to them?" "When they succeed," said the past Medivh, "they will make me their leader. They respect strength, mother. Unlike you or the rest of this sorry world. And thanks to you, I'm the strongest thing in this world, and I will have broken the shackles that you and others have placed on me. And I will rule." There was a silence in the vision, and Khadgar and Garona froze, holding their breath. Would the present Medivh notice them in the silence? Egwin, speaking from the years past, held his attention. "You are not my son," she said. The present Medivh put his face in his hands. His past vision said, "No. I've never been your son. Never truly yours in any case." And the past Medivh laughed. It was a deep, thundering laugh that Khadgar heard before on the icy steppes when these two last battled. Egwin looked shocked. "Sargeras," he spat in final recognition. "Killed you." "You killed a body witch. You only killed my physical form," snarled the Medivh of the past, and already Khadgar could see the overlay of the second being, the alternative shadow that consumed him, the creature of shadow and flame with a beard of fire and great ebony horns. "Killed it and hid it away in a tomb beneath the sea. But I was willing to sacrifice it to gain a greater prize." Despite herself, Egwin put a hand over her stomach. "Yes, mother dear," said the past Medivh, the flames licking at his beard, the horns forming out of smoke before his brows. He was Medivh, but Sargeras as well. "I hid in your womb, and passed into the slumbering cells of your unformed child. A cancer, a blight, a birth defect that you would never surmise. Killing you was impossible. Seducing you unlikely. So I made myself your heir." Egwin shouted a curse and lurched her hands upwards, her anger wrapped around words not made for human voices. A bolt of scandalizing rainbow energy struck the Medivh/Sargeras creature full in the chest. The phantom of the past staggered back one step, then two raised a single hand and caught the energy cast at him. The room smelled of cooking meat, and the Sargeras/Medivh snarled and spat. He invoked a spell of his own, and Egwin was flung across the room. "I can't cannot kill you, mother, snapped the demon form. Some part of me keeps me from doing that, but I will break you. Break you and banish you. And by the time you've healed, by the time you've walked back from where I will send you, this land will be mine. This land and the power of the Order of Tirisfal. In the present day, Medivh let out a howl of a lost soul, screaming into the heavens for forgiveness that would never be forthcoming. That's our cue, said Garona, pulling on Kagar's robe. Let's get while the getting's good. Kagar hesitated for a moment, then followed her up to the stairs. They tumbled down the stone stairs 3 at a time, almost slamming into Morose. Excited? He noted calmly. Problem? Gorno hurled past the Castilian, but Kagar grabbed the older man and said, The master's gone mad. More than usual? It's not a joke, said Kagar. His eyes lit up. Do you have the whistle to summon the griffins? The servant raised the rune-carved piece of metal. Wish me to summon? I'll do it, said Kagar, grabbing the item from his hand and hurling after Grona. He's after us, but you had better run as well. Take Cook and flee as far as you can. And with that, Kagar was lost to view. Flee? Said Morose to the apprentice's retreating form. Then he sorted. Wherever would I go?